3, 2, and 1.
Hello, I'm Dr. Lenore Walker, and I'm chairing the COVID IPV task force, which is part of the larger task force on psychologists and mental health professionals dealing with COVID. Our goal is to provide information for other mental health professionals and for other people who jump on our Zoom call or our Facebook Live. We are on Facebook Live on COVID IPV. We are joined together with Dr. Eileen Serlin, who is chair of the International Whole Persons group, which is another way of looking at trauma and healing from trauma using creative arts. And they also have a Facebook page, and we're live on their Facebook page as well, which means even if you can't catch us live, you still will be able to view our video. And that's very exciting because we have people who will be coming on and off the Zoom call as well as in Facebook. Right now, I'm going to introduce a few who are here, and then I'm going to introduce our very special guest speaker who's going to help us continue to celebrate Valentine's Day. I hope that all of you have been involved with some people that you love or some things that you love, because that's what Valentine's Day is about. It's about love. And so we're going to talk about different ways of celebrating. But right now, let me introduce, you met Dr. Giselle Gaviria. Giselle is here in South Florida, even though it looks like she's in Machu Picchu, which she has been to Machu Picchu. And so has Rachel and Patricia, who you'll meet in a moment. We also have Dr. Eleanor Parnas, who is from Israel, and she's on with us. And I introduced Dr. Eileen Serlin. She's from San Francisco, and Dr. Patricia Villavicencio Carrillo, who is from Madrid, Spain. So you can see we're from all over. We'll have other people jumping on as they can to participate with us. If you are on Facebook, please type in your comments. We will be looking at them and reviewing them. And if you have any kinds of questions, we'll try to answer them during this hour. We're going to spend some time with Dr. Needle doing a little presentation because she is the expert in sex and love. She is a certified sex therapist. She runs a major practice in Palm Beach, Florida, but she travels all over the country, all over the world. We're talking about how we have been friends for about 20 years now in a number of different capacities, including a co-author together, and we're doing a big video presentation where we're hopefully going to have videos that people can get continuing education credits for. We're working very hard to get it up. I hope maybe by spring or summer. We keep saying that, Rachel, but I really think this time we've got about a third of it done. So it's going to work well. So with that, I'm going to let Dr. Needle take it over, and anxious to hear what you're going to tell us. So go ahead.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be doing this topic very near and dear to my heart. You mentioned a lot of things about me. I wanted to just add that I am co-director also of Modern Sex Therapy Institutes, which is a continuing education provider company, and we train and certify sex and relationship therapists around the world. So feel free to check out our Facebook page and our website, modernsextherapyinstitutes.com as well, for lots of great content. So, as a therapist, I think it's important because when we talk about, I'm going to talk about sex and relationships, but I think about how the pandemic has impacted relationships in general, not just romantic relationships. So in so many ways, it has impacted how we interact with and our current relationships with family, with our friends, with everybody in our lives, with coworkers, in so many different ways. And, I'm not putting a modifier on this. It could be good, less good ways, but if nothing else, it's important to acknowledge that relationships have changed during the time of COVID, and continue to be changed. We've had to change the way that we interact. So I'll move into talking about romantic relationships, which I know is what we wanted to talk about today. But we can start with just the very basic that have to do with COVID, right? And that is how we handle COVID and what our thoughts are on COVID. So it has created, for some, a lot of tension, a lot of resentment, and for others, it's bonded them. So for those that, and we'll start with the first, that, for instance, don't agree on how it should be handled, or don't agree on, how they want to implement their safety measures. It has forced us to have conversations that perhaps we weren't having before. These are conversations that, as relationship experts, we've always wanted people to have when it comes to, talking about what they want for their lives, when it comes to talking about tough subjects like sexually transmitted infections, when it comes to talking about, what they want for their relationship, right? Tough conversations to have, which we've always encouraged. If you weren't doing this in your relationship before, COVID has forced us to start having a different kind of conversation, but in a similar way. So for some, it includes coming up with a middle ground of what they feel comfortable with in terms of being out in the world, choices that they're going to make when they are out in the world. For some, if they have to go to work, others don't. How are they going to handle, when they come home, right? So couples who can't even agree on, one wants their partner to just like strip when they get home, put your stuff in the wash, right? What we've been told. And the other is like, that makes no sense. It doesn't really live on clothes. And so they've had to really almost negotiate and find that middle ground, which again is something that we want couples to be skilled at, but they're not always skilled at. So that's sort of one of the big things that I've seen come up just from the very start. How we address situations, how we communicate. And I'm going to get into communication a little bit in more detail, but I want to go through some of the other things that we've seen. So, and right now I'm talking about when you're in a, committed relationship or, whether or not you live with somebody, but that's what I'm focusing on right now. And then we can talk about people with relationships when they're single too. So the other thing is that people, at least at the beginning, right, we're spending a lot more time together, sometimes in a very small space, depending on where you live and what your living arrangements are. And that is something that maybe they weren't so used to, right? We're used to having a certain amount of time with our partner or our partners. And now all of a sudden we're forced to not only have a lot more time than we've been accompanied, used to, but in a different type of way. So we've seen some really positive things come out of that, where people are enjoying their time together, where they don't feel pressed for, time the way when they came home from a long day at work and they were really exhausted and tired. They, would only have 30 minutes with their partner. Like, we're seeing people that are really using that time and taking advantage of it and becoming closer with their partner and really realizing what drew them to their partners in the first place. And then we're having the opposite of that happen, where people are having a really hard time. Like, this is a lot of time with this person. I didn't realize the extent of certain things that they do, or quirks, or the way that they handle certain things, or things they do throughout the day that maybe are things we didn't have to see when we weren't around them 24/7. So it really has gone, I think both ways. And for those that, are maybe realizing that it's not such a good fit, even though this is a time that hopefully won't be replicated. So we'll go back at some point to having our space. There are some people that are realizing this and thinking like, okay, I don't want to be in this relationship, but there's really no way to separate right now if you are living together, especially. So I have a lot of couples and individuals who are talking about this who, whether or not they were legally married or not, they're wanting to separate, divorce, and yet it's now been 10 months that they are still living with this person where they no longer want to be in this relationship. So it's caused a lot of issues with that as well. And at this point, what do you do when you are living and confined, again, sometimes to a very small space with this person where you now have technically ended the relationship or decided you wanted to end it, but there's no, safely, there's no where you're going to go at this point. There's no way to separate physically during this time. So that's caused some issues. And of course, we can't not kind of touch on the fact that there is sort of this collective trauma that's going on, and that there is so much stress that we have all gone through during this time, even, if it was just about the change. And relationships, oftentimes thrive during stressful times, and oftentimes it's quite the opposite. So we are seeing sort of the difference of how people support each other during very stressful times. And I think that's something that's really important, because in any relationship, it's a lot easier to get along and maintain a strong relationship when we don't have a whole lot going on, right? And some do, some don't. That doesn't mean that people are coming at this not having had that, but until there's a major stressor put on a relationship, and that could include somebody getting very sick, not COVID related. This could include, a child, entering a child into the relationship, or, a child having health problems, or something that, requires that you get on the same page, that you talk about things differently, that, where you're highly stressed. So I think that this is something that we've seen a lot of, and navigating how you communicate during this time is super important. That being said, when we talk about how to communicate, we want, I've been working with a lot of clients on, similarly to all times, but especially during COVID, making sure that you are keeping your own emotions in check, and making sure that you are honoring and paying attention to what your needs are, what emotions are coming up, and being able to process that themselves, and then within their partnership or partnerships. So in doing so, we, of course, go back to our basic rules of communication, and that is communicating from our heart, talking about emotions, not blaming, shaming, criticizing, putting down, making sure that we are clear about our motivations and feelings. So whenever there's something that comes up, approaching that conversation, knowing what you want out of it, not just going in blind saying, this are annoying me, making sure that you have a plan for the conversation, that it is, one thing at a time for each conversation, that you're using I statements, for example, rather than, again, pointing the finger at or blaming, making sure that people are talking in a way that their partners can truly hear them. So that those things have been even more important as the stress and anxiety in relationships has, for a lot of people, skyrocketed, right? Whether that's as a result of the relationship or as a result of what's going on in our world, COVID related, that's happened. So I'm going to shift for a minute and talk a little bit about sex within a relationship and alone. So for sex, for people in relationships, again, like, do they live together? Do they not? How are they taking precautions for COVID? Is one going out and working in the world and the other is not? If so, what's the safest way, even though you're still living together, to continue to be physically intimate? And a lot of people, that's a negotiation with what they're comfortable with, how much, what their risk is themselves, what their partner's risk is. And they're, we're talking a lot about, self-pleasuring, right? Masturbation being the safest way to be sexually active during the pandemic. So making sure that you are taking precautions with that as well, because sex, both in and out of a relationship can be so important. out of it, I mean, it relieves stress, it reduces anxiety, it, improves our immune system and our mental health in general, right? So to stay healthy, we want to be engaging in some sort of sexual activity with or without our partner. So, again, I've, talked about sort of coronavirus related stress, right? We have the, negotiations, we have the financial stress, the career, health, et cetera, that can all impact our desire for sex, right? There's no right way to feel during this time. And it's important that we acknowledge too what our new normal is. So if this is impacting your desire and you're in a relationship, you want to see if you're on the same page. And is there a way that you can just decide, okay, as long as, again, there's no trauma involved and you're comfortable. So it's very different than, the intimate partner violence that we're talking about a lot in this group, right? If you're in a healthy relationship and one where you feel comfortable with your partner and want to engage in sexual activity, can you just do it, right? As long as nothing's triggering, there's no trauma that is impacting that. How do you make sure that you are maintaining that connection, both for your own health and for the health of the relationship? Now, of course, that's very different, as I mentioned, in the case of intimate partner violence and the, relationships where you don't feel safe and you don't feel healthy. So in those situations, you're going to want to avoid being intimate with your partner as much as possible. But in doing, if you do decide to, figuring out ways that you can feel safe in doing that, ways that you can be in control as much as possible in that moment, so that even if you're not in control of certain parts of the relationship and how that plays out, maybe there's a way that you can figure out a way where you can be in control and take control of that part of your relationship, if that's something that, oftentimes you don't have as much choice or control in, unfortunately. So I want to kind of pause for a minute and give a chance for people to chime in on the things that I have said so far and talk about what you've seen both personally and in your own practices, where couples are coming in with challenges that are different than pre-COVID challenges.
Anybody jumping in?
Well, I'll just say thanks, Rich. I've been taking notes, as you can see. You've sort of put your finger on a number of things I've noticed, but I haven't quite articulated that way. So I just want to thank you for that, especially the need for communication, because I see that over and over. Everything has to be renegotiated. Personal space, safety questions, and that actually changes everything, because I think so many of us had routines before that we finally had developed over some time together, and all of that has to be renegotiated. A lot of it has to be renegotiated. So that to me,
that's a really good point, something that I left out, but so important. And I love that word, renegotiated, right? Because oftentimes we have this routine and we have, a lot of us in a way negotiated parts of our relationship. And you're right, exactly right. It had to be renegotiated because there have been so many changes. And I think that's important, even not in COVID, to remember that in relationships, we should be going back and checking in with our partners, just, regardless of COVID. Like, we have agreements and negotiations with our partner, or we have, agreed upon things, or for some couples, they have not agreed upon things. It's just assumed. So checking in, I tell people even once a month, having like a check-in about like what's going well, what's missing, what do we want to be different? Are we comfortable with everything that's going on in the relationship and happy? What are our, next month goals for the relationship? What's our year goal for the relationship? I think that's very powerful as well. So thanks for bringing that up.
I really also resonated with that idea of renegotiating and how important it is to see that as an opportunity, because really like having each person be able to count on his ability to say yes or no's, and sometimes that's really a problem, to say yes and to say no, especially COVID has confused a lot of that. when to say yes, to renegotiate proximity, how close, how distant, what feels right to me, what doesn't feel right to me. So I really think that, when we can take responsibility for our own needs and our own wants, and it's difficult because we are often confused, and it's important to make space and validate that it is confusing. And also when people are after 2 shots and coming back after being very cautious, it's also confusing to renegotiate again post-COVID.
Yeah.
So I really think, I really appreciate that focus. And I would suggest, instead of coming from an attachment perspective, safeness as a basic for playfulness and exploration, not necessarily control, because I think, relaxed, nothing is in control. Really, nothing is in control. If we hadn't noticed that, really, we can see nothing is in control. So safeness is something different. And I would highlight the safeness. I really want to thank you.
And I think that's wonderful too. It made me think of also like the importance of being flexible, is that, especially at a time like this, we have to be more flexible and more open and not as rigid, and, allow for, be open to different things.
I wanted to pick up on Eleanor's comment about safety. I'm sorry, because there was a cartoon or a little video going around the internet about 2 animals, 2 lemurs cuddling, these like monkeys cuddling with each other. And so there's the importance of touch. First of all, what happens when you don't have anybody, but I'm reminded of, and I like to think about hibernation, and during these times, especially in the winter, especially many people are living in cold weather now, and this real animal need to curl up with each other and touch and be held. That really doesn't necessarily have anything to do with sex, but it has everything to do with comfort and attachment and safety. And A, what you do if you're alone and you don't have that. Or B, for many people, they have to renegotiate. This is not about sex, but we really need time to just touch and be together, and comfort and safety is very important these times.
I want to add go ahead, Patricia.
I would like to add to this. There are cultural differences between, social Spanish, Latin American, how we handle the social distance in a way before COVID. I remember myself living in New York when I was a teenager, coming from Lima, Peru, where everybody hugs you and kisses you, which I did not like that much. But it was really a shock for me, not in Florida though. Florida has a different culture, even not Cuban, American, not Cuban American. But I remember myself feeling very uncomfortable with the social distance between, very young people between each other at that times, that we had to and then I learned how to behave, like having one more like 2 feet away. Nobody touches you and hardly kisses you. You kiss with very close friends. And here in Spain, for example, it's not that usual to hug and kiss with acquaintances. Although still, there is worse here. We kiss twice. But now, with COVID times, I'm really concerned about young people and teenagers, that this being together and being very close, at least thinking about how young people here in Spain behave, very close, and kids talk, they almost like one over the other, and now they have to keep the distance and wear the mask, and how are they learn how is the other, and which I have a lots of concern about social media and how this is attracting young people to get contact with strangers, and how pedophiles are catching kids through this social media, especially kids with lack of social skills and isolation.
Vulnerabilities.
Yes, it's very high, which we have to do something about it. And also with young, people over 20s that feel that they don't have the chance to get to know other people their age and start a relationship when they don't have it. So, and people of any age, but especially young people, right?
Yeah, Rachel, I had a question for you. I've had a couple of clients that are struggling right now with connecting with other individuals, trying to find partners, obviously you've been using either any of the sites such as Bumble, Tinder, a bunch of different sites, but they're still having difficulty because they're saying, should I meet them? Should I not? Where is this going? How long is it? Social distancing comes into play as well, and all these other things. If you have any recommendation.
Yeah, of course. I think this is a huge issue right now, right? How to maintain safety while still, being able to meet. So, I talk to people about being creative during the pandemic.
Yeah,
So,
thank you. Yeah.
what?
Go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, being creative. So maybe getting to know people virtually. So if we were going to plan, a date and dinner date, we could somehow plan it, online like this. And maybe one of us plans it and, sends the other the meal or something, and we talk. So interacting and being creative with technology, right? For virtual dates. And I think for some, right, this is also a huge change in a lot of people are spending time really getting to know people before being sexual, or engaging in sex through technology, sexting, games, mutual masturbation. So there's different options for that as well. But it's certainly changed our behavior, and we need to make sure that we're being creative and doing fun things. For some, it depends on your comfort level, right, and your safety. So some people have decided to do picnics in the park, right? So you maintain your distance, you do what you can, but you are able to then meet in person. It really depends on you and your comfort level. There are plenty of people that are still meeting and going to restaurants and doing things. So again, like whatever it is that you put in place for your own life. Me, I'm like, I don't leave this area. So it just depends on your comfort level, and be creative. I've encouraged people to use this as an opportunity to really do fun things and be creative in a way that maybe they'll even want to continue after.
Yes.
I'm going to jump on the word creative, which is our committee, and fun. I've been reflecting on, so many people are talking about one of the effects of COVID is the what we're calling it, Groundhog Day syndrome. Like what day is today? Every day blends into every other, work life. It's all a mush. And so how do you make special moments? And I was reflecting that on Valentine's Day. What's special? What can we do that's special? We normally, there's a certain restaurant we go to, we have certain, well, if you can't do those things, and then, but even more important, how do you embed special moments into days that all look alike, that kind of get boring? How do you introduce a special meal or a new something to drink, or whatever you can do to just make it, bring back a little bit of the spark, a little bit of the appreciation that we don't have access to otherwise.
So, and I'll add to the creativity and what you said, thoughtfulness, right? Like, how can we be more thoughtful in the way we are with our partner, so that our partners, so that, we are continuing to feel special and feel loved and make the other person or people feel the same. you
I'm going
know?
to say with Zoom, my husband brings me coffee all day long. I sit at Zoom. He sneaks in. He knows that his new job is to feed me coffee so I can sit at the Zoom. So that we
Love
didn't
it.
have that before. Yeah.
Another thing that I'm thinking about is the use of Post-its, leaving notes behind all over the house, or follow this trail, or so forth and so on. Creating little games if you're living with a partner.
Absolutely. Again, something that you can continue, like not just during COVID, like how sweet to be able to find that. Again, getting to knowing your partner and what they would appreciate. So it's a lot easier for us to do things that we think are thoughtful and special, and things that we really like. Instead, communicate that to your partner. I really love if you did something like left post-it, blah, blah, blah. What would you like? What would be special to you? Because to your partner, that might drive them nuts. They might not like that. Or that just might be whatever, just nice that you did it, but not, mean what it would to you. So what would be meaningful to them? So getting to know your partner in that way, listening, paying attention to things that maybe they mentioned so that you can implement that as well. So I like that though. I'll take the Post-its. I like that.
I like that also, not only for partners, also for your kids.
Absolutely,
with
absolutely.
Your partners, with your roommates, because you're spending so much time together now that it's nice to find a Post-it or something special during the day, which will calm down the stress of living 24/7 together, right?
Mhm.
Right.
Yep. All relationships. Sorry.
And I think it's not an accident that for many people who are single and don't have a partner have adopted pets. The shelters, the animal shelters were emptied when COVID first began, because people took them, they fostered. They weren't sure that they wanted a pet, but they knew they were going to have to be at home. So they took a pet home. And I don't know whether they refilled. I haven't really quite followed that. But my husband and I, of course, adopted a little pet, a little puppy, who has given us a whole lot of pleasure and a very different way of relating. Like, do you know where she is? Where is she now? or what did she do? And laughing about some of the little things that puppies do. So I think, I think it was a lot of work. We didn't understand how much work it was going to be. But I think that is another way of looking at how do you get that touch. I remember being on listening to one woman who was saying that a tree frog jumped into her apartment or into her house on the ground floor, and she was so excited that she ran after it and picked it up and just touched a live thing. So I think that is such a need that people have to plan for that need to be able to touch different kinds of things, different textures, that really make it important. And I worry about our young people. I worry about our adolescents. This is the time when they need to be exploring their own gender identity and their own sexuality. What can we do for them to help them? Any ideas?
Yeah, I mean, just continue to check in, like the things that we would want to be doing anyway, right? Continue to check in with them, and there are other ways to explore that without having to be with other people and out, right? They can use technology to explore that. They can use even images or thoughts on their own to explore. For now, we will hopefully get back to a place. I mean, I think what you touched on, Lenore, too, is just not just how important connection is, but how important touch is to most of us, not everybody, right? But to so many of us, and what a difference that makes. And there is actually research that talks about the importance of touch. And so touch and cuddle can be from an animal. I mean, a lot of us get that from it's like, it can be a hug from a partner. It can be a hug from a family member, which again, many of us aren't doing right now. And so a pretty safe bet is an animal, about getting to, I know every morning when I rub my dog's belly, that does something for me. That is like one of my favorite times of the day. Snuggling with my dog when I wake up.
Rachel, I just wanted to underscore something so basic, so simple that you said at the beginning, but we overlook. I get couples all the time who forget that these are extraordinary circumstances. Their stress level is so high, they're afraid of losing a job or going back, and forget that because we're isolated, if they were hearing that so many couples are experiencing this kind of stress and taking it out on each other, they think there's something really wrong, that they're both irritable, that they're getting impatient with each other. So just to be reminded that these are not ordinary times, and don't, to try to put in some safeguards. We talked about this on the time about interpersonal violence, to learn how to manage your own emotions so you're not taking it out on your partner. How easy it is to just snap at your partner, and people are feeling guilty and out of control and all that. Just to remind people that these are not ordinary times is we take for granted, but really people need to be reminded of it, to take special precautions, not to take out their emotions on each other, that a lot of stress is completely normal or understandable during these times.
Yeah, I like that, normalizing it.
Yeah. I also really appreciated your focus on the middle ground, because the middle ground is an issue of balancing and going back to balancing and restoring balancing. So finding that middle ground, it's not something that we stick on, or we just, too close, too far, and renegotiating that. And I think that, I see many people who are at risk for being abused because they're so lonely, and they would rush part of the problem is rushing into these obsessive relationships to undo the aloneness, and really finding them have their own internal compass and responding instead of reacting, and finding a way to care for themselves and care for others, and find their center of gravity. I think that's finding the middle ground is so essential to having that secure base from which you can, be intimate. Without that safeness, no intimacy. And it's important for people to know to, slow down when they're in partnerships, but also when they're not, and they're looking for and very hungry to establish a new relationship.
I would like to add to this. COVID times, it's fostering a lot of dependence to the other person in your relationship. No social relationships with other people, and strengthening this dependence, needing that could be dangerous. So we have to keep up having our friends in our circles, family, and not just focus to your partner's relationship.
Yeah, that's so important. I want to emphasize that, because it's not just the issue around partners, it's also the issue around friendships. Many of our friends have adjusted to COVID in a different way. We had been talking a little before about how some people are so germ conscious that they don't want to go out, they don't want to be with anybody. And I think in some ways that can be harmful to their ability to just have relationships because they're so scared. The fear prevents them from getting involved, whereas others would get over involved, and they don't use good judgment about who they should be relating to and who not to, or to really checking it out. Here, some people have been getting into what they called a bubble with a certain number of people, and those people promise each other that they're not going to go outside of that bubble. So it's only those people who relate to each other. I find that it's very successful when you have little children and they need playmates, and so they can get together that way. I don't know that, COVID has lasted now for almost a year for many people. How much longer we're going to have to go through all of this? Next week we're going to talk a little bit about after the COVID vaccine, because so many of us have been able to either get vaccinated or who have unfortunately developed COVID and have antibodies produced from it. So it's an interesting mix of, do you change friendships? Do you make new friendships? How do you make a new friendship when you're all sort of locked down? Any ideas? I have more questions than answers, of course.
So
Oh,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, no, go ahead, Rachel.
I want to hear from you. I've talked a lot. Go.
No, I want to add that I adopted a dog, a Labrador. He's Theo, he's 4 years. And here in Madrid, there is a semi-lockdown. And so I go to work, which is a bit dangerous because I work in a hospital, in a mental health center. And okay, I'm COVID free, but my kid goes to school every day, and not all the kids go to school. But since I have Theo, I have started talking to my neighbors with dogs. But you know what happens, which concerns me a lot? We play with balls with the dogs, right? And all the owners handle and throw the ball to the dog. So I keep my spray and I keep spraying my hand, and I say, oh my God, what it's something that we need to relearn how to even play with our pets in the outdoors. It's very hard, but I'm having a very good time learning how to meet my neighbors since I have my pet, right? But I'm really concerned about this.
I just wanted to, thanks, Patricia. We've talked about sex, intimacy, communication, touch. I just wanted to introduce the word love, because that comes in many forms. Lenore was talking about friends, for example. And my experience at the beginning of COVID, actually, I hugged a friend who then turned out to be COVID positive. And I remember back at the beginning of COVID, it was about 3 weeks before we got test results back. I didn't know if I was positive for about 3 weeks. And I was living with this uncertainty about, and of course, some of us have seen friends die. And during this time, I'm 72, also just colleagues, friends have been sick, deaths of family members. And I think this realization of mortality, I found myself saying, I love you to friends, family, more than I ever have. And there was this feeling of, why hold back? If today is the last day of my life, if we don't get out of this alive, why hold back on letting people know we love them? And that just seems to be a really important part of this. So love, can be separate from sex, touch, all those other things, and just the importance of that during these times.
Thank you, Elaine, to add that, because since we started our group, I feel that I love you all so much. Even though we haven't met personally, right? And we are such a support to each other.
Absolutely.
Even though it's virtual love and understanding and cooperation.
And
So
Patricia, I feel the same way. And some of us in this group have dealt with deaths of family members, all kinds of things, and we've told each other and we've supported each other through it. And some of us started out as strangers.
yeah, and now it's like what you say. I try to say to my friends, and I love you more than you never know. That's true. That has confronted us with death, even though it depends, not even the age. It's you can be young and be in front of death. You know, my kid is only 16, and he had 3 pneumonias when he was a kid, and I'm really concerned about his health. I'm really scared if he gets COVID, not for myself.
Yeah.
All right. So it's like love and concern and being frightened. And so nice to add the word love. And we need to love each other more and respect and give to the others support, even though we are not like family. We're all together in this, right?
Wow. Patricia, I really resonate with that sense of connectedness that, you know, also as a group and professionals and personal life. I think also we need to be nourished as we nourish others, and, you know, all we need is love and to be loved. But also it reminded me of last session that we talked, our last meeting, we talked about nature, and we talked about some say love. I think there was Bette Midler, the rose. Some say love, it is a razor, and some say love, it is a river. But you know, it's the heart afraid of breaking that never takes the chance, and the heart, you know, the one who cannot give, cannot be taken, who can't seem to give. And I really feel that COVID has highlighted that sense of, you know, love and loss and coping with the separation anxiety and, you know, giving and receiving and renegotiating that. And I really appreciate that connection, which is so important for all of us.
I agree. I think that the goal originally, I think in setting up this group, was to give away our information, but I think we get as much or more than we give very often, because we have become very bonded, even missing some of the people who are usually on that we see that haven't been able to come on, and hoping they will come back next week as well, because it is a way of we're all in it together. You know, we're all trying to figure this crazy world out. You know, and it is important to have the ability to continue to love, even though there's uncertainty. And I think we need, I think, Eileen, you were the one who said it, we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, but we know we have today. And so we can be as full as we can with love for the day and the things that we do and the people that we connect with.
You know, Lenore, thanks. My mother used to say, this old mother wisdom, you know, don't ever go to bed angry.
My mother's used to say that too.
You know, one of those things. But I do ask myself, and I feel a little superstitious, but sort of every day I think, or even if I walk out the door, I think, if something were to happen, have I said I love you? You know, if I found that these were my last words. I'm sort of haunted by these tales of astronauts or, you know, people caught in fire. I'm reading about the Point Reyes fires, all the fires that, but you don't really have time. And because that was part of COVID, is the fires up here, you know, reading stories about people who didn't have time to pack their things or what they're going to grab. And sort of, if this were your last day, have you told people that it matters, that you love them? And I find I kind of am asking myself that often. Yeah.
And I think that's so important that you say that. I mean, like, and my mother used to say that too, right? And I always think about those types of things, but I think that's a good thing for us always to think about is, you know, life is short, and we should be expressing our feelings, our appreciation, our love for people in our lives, not just our romantic partners, but family, friends, people, you know, that's something that would be great if, you know, not just for other people, but for ourselves, right? To feel good about where we're at and, you know, regardless of what's going to happen. So I really love that. I think it's so important, and, you know, make a point of not just being grateful, but expressing appreciation to people in my life as well, on a regular basis.
And the only thing you've just added, Rachel, that we didn't sort of mention or make explicit, that's part of this, is loving oneself. So whether it's little treats, I take bubble baths every night. And actually a client of mine sent me through Amazon a special bubble bath. She knew I liked bubble baths. That was her way of saying, I love you. So every night when I pour this exotic bubble bath in, I think of her and all these little touches. Yeah.
Right, right. Well, we're getting close to the end of the hour. We have a few minutes to add, or we can talk next week. You know, we've got another presentation I think we have scheduled for next week, although I don't have the schedule in front of me at the moment. Giselle, maybe you have it. But we were talking about COVID and the vaccine and how we react, those of us who have gotten the vaccine. I don't know who's gotten it.
One.
I got 2. Eleanor got 2. Patricia, did you get it yet?
Oh,
You're muted here. Yeah.
You're muted.
You're muted, yeah.
I don't have it. I will not have it because 5 years ago I had a very bad reaction to one of the vaccines, flu vaccines. And I had to be one night in the hospital. And since they say that if you have had any kind of reactions to vaccines like that, you should wait. So
this is very good. So we'll have different people who have had different experiences to be able to talk about them.
Yeah, I have to cross my fingers
next week. Yes.
So next week's discussion is going to be on February 25th, creativity, need for innovation, use of imagery, importance of imagination.
Yes, I'm glad we clarified that, because I did invite some speakers. I know we changed our schedule. I was going to check also when the vaccine conversation, but so far we've invited, this is from our committee, so I'll say a few words. We're all under this task force. It's a little confusing. We use 2 words. Let me just say, a task force is this overall group. We have about 80 people now that meet at various times, generally Friday mornings, every other Friday, with Dr. Charles Figley and Dr. Lenore Walker, and some of us who have gathered since the beginning of COVID. That big group separated into smaller groups. We have at least 10 that have different, each one has a different focus. So this one is sponsored by the Interpersonal Violence. Ours focuses on, since I'm a psychologist and a dance therapist, we work a lot about trauma is not verbal. So we work with techniques and embodied ways of dealing with the stresses, the anxieties. We do exercises and creativity. So I've invited for next week Dr. Vivian Marcos Spicer, with whom I taught at Lesley University for many years and in Israel. She was the founder of the program in Netanya. Mostly based out of Cambridge, though, in Boston, Lesley. I've also invited, I hope she can come, I'm waiting to hear, Susan Magnuson, who is started, Johns Hopkins has this amazing institute called Neuroaesthetics, where they research things like the effect of music on the brain. And I've been listening to music now in the evening too, as part of dealing with COVID. So, and sending little video clips. So she can talk about research. I hope she can come. Her schedule is unbelievably busy, and share with us. We've been sending some of their resources into, we also keep, so everybody should know, big resource banks. We've been curating the large committee, curating resources from each one of these areas and making them available periodically. So you can find these links on Facebook. You can find out how to access the resources, and we send them to all the various divisions and people who participate in the larger task force. So hopefully you'll hear in person from her and from Dr. Spicer, who also works internationally, about some ways around the world that using the arts, creativity, somatic therapies to deal with the effects of COVID.
Very exciting, very exciting. And then the following week, we'll talk about the COVID vaccine. So
We'll have more by then, more of us.
I will have more people in, who will be inoculated by then. But we will have people who are not going to get it for a variety of reasons. And for some of them, I think it's important to understand what their bodies can handle, like as Patricia is saying, but it's also important for us to talk about some of our patients who are not getting it and are not taking precautions. How do we handle that? And some of our friends who are in the same position. So we have a lot of work to do. It's exciting. I want to thank Dr. Rachel Needle of the Modern Sex Therapy Institutes for really giving us so much information and to stimulate such a great discussion amongst us. I noted in the chat, I don't know if anybody has seen it, but we have some other people who have been on the chat and Facebook, and they've been posting some interesting comments. And so I want to thank everybody. The video will probably be up for another week or two, and then we download them and we put them on YouTube eventually. We're still trying to do that. And we've gotten some great advice on how to do it. So I'm sure we're going to start working on that. So with that, I'm going to close and say goodbye to everybody. Have a safe and wonderful week. And again, Rachel, thank you so
Thank you,
so
Rachel.
much.
Thank you. Thank you.